Welcome to class tonight for the Gospels course, focusing on the Gospel of Matthew. Last week we learned that Jesus had 5 major sermons in the Gospel of Matthew. Tonight we'll talk about his second major sermon in Matthew chapter 10, verses 1 through chapter 11, verse 1. And this is where we look at Matthew creating a characterization of the other. Both Gentiles and Jews that are not within his community. And he uses Jesus' sermon to do this. This video lecture won't be long tonight, but there's going to be a lot of material for you to cover in your readings. I have questions that are in this presentation, but I've also uploaded them to our e-learning site so that you can print them out and see those questions in front of you. You can also do it on your screen. And look at those questions over against the readings. So we're going to pay attention to this sermon from Jesus in Matthew chapter 10, verses 1 through 11, chapter 11, verse 1, and see how Matthew constructs the other. But we're also going to pay real close attention to the readings for tonight, the Saldarini's readings and Carter's readings, and has very specific questions related to those readings. And that's where you can either pause this video or watch it all the way through and then go to our e-learning site and use those files that I uploaded to answer the questions. So we're talking about the other. What does it mean for us as human beings to relate to other human beings, both good and bad? When we construct the other, how do we understand another's humanity, both good and bad? And you'll see in Matthew, when Jesus preaches his sermon, Jesus is telling the disciples when they go out how they're supposed to interact with other people. So this is where you could either pause it and answer these questions, or just know that all these questions and outline are Word documents that are already uploaded to e-learning site. Verses 1 through 4 provide the setting where Jesus' sermon happens, and then verses 5 through 15 deal with the mission. So in your own time, out beyond this lecture, you will need to answer these questions. To whom are they sent and not sent, specifically the disciples? What are they to proclaim? What are they to do? The next main section is verses 16 through 25, coming persecutions. How should the disciples prepare to be treated? Who will betray whom? Next section, whom to fear. Who should the disciples fear and why? How are they compared to sparrows? It's a real interesting questions, and you'll see in Jesus' sermons in this process, Matthew's kind of drawing a line around his community and defining who's in and who's out, and how those who are in are supposed to act. And then in these verses 34 through 39 is probably the most provocative verses in the entire Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus says, I have not come to bring peace but a sword. Does this fly in the face of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, the first sermon he preaches when he talks about love your enemies? It's an interesting question to pursue. And finally, what are the rewards in verses 40 through 42? What is the benefit of being on mission? How does this second major sermon or discourse relate to the Matthean community in Antioch, or Matthew's community in Antioch? So look at these questions, pull them off the e-learning site, and read through the text itself while you answer it. This next section is Saldarini's other. In Saldarini's work, Matthew's Christian Jewish community, I want you to pay very close attention to pages 68 through 83. Now, these readings, both in Saldarini and Carter, will help you on your midterm, so it's worth the time you spend on it. But here are some discussion questions for Saldarini's other. I think this title of this section is Matthew's Horizon, the Nations. Saldarini's other. So characterization of non-Jews. Saldarini describes in pages 68 through 75 how Matthew characterizes Gentiles in his gospel. So read through Salderini, pages 68 through 70, and answer these questions. Who were the four Gentile women in Jesus' lineage? How is the story of the centurion's son used in chapter 8, verses 5 through 13? What story manifests the tensions felt over the admission of Gentiles into the Matthean group? The Matthean group is still wrestling with the problem of what? The non Jews who appear in Matthew's narrative are what? All these questions will help you, as you read through Salderini, will help you get a much better understanding of what's going on in the Gospel of Matthew as Matthew negotiates the inclusion of Gentiles into this Jesus movement. Then you'll move on, once you answer those questions, move on to pages 75 through 70, the place of the non-Jewish world. What remains as part of Matthew's world despite his openness to non-Jews who respond to Jesus? Those pages will help you understand that. And then the next couple of pages, non-Jewish authorities. The Gentile authorities are simply there as what to first century Jewish society and the Roman Empire? That question is incredibly important. I think it might even be on your midterm. And then the meaning of ethne. Ethne is a Greek word, usually translates as the nations or as Gentiles. So read those 3 pages, 78 through 81 in Salderini, and answer those 2 questions. What 4 considerations does Salderini propose when analyzing ethne in Matthew? And then finally, Matthew's use of the Greek words ethnos, ethne, and ethnikos follow normal what? Find those answers there in those pages, and then read Salderini's conclusion in pages 81 through 82. I think by dealing with the readings for class in this way, it certainly prepares you for your midterm in some profound ways, but it also gives you an idea of how Salderini is interpreting the book of Matthew and probably what's actually going on in the gospel. After you work through the passage itself in chapter 10 and then Salderini's work, then I want you to turn towards Warren Carter's chapter, Take My Yoke, Not Rome's, Matthew 11:28 through 30. This is on page 108 to 129 in Carter's book. These are all online. You can easily, these are the readings for class. So here I want you to notice that this is actually a picture I took when I was in Rome at a museum. And this is ancient graffiti. And you'll see this cross here. This was the Romans' way of making fun of Jesus dying on the cross. So here you have somebody nailed to the cross, but with a donkey's head or an ass's head. And this is how they would make fun of Jesus and the Jesus followers from a Roman perspective. So the way Matthew engages Roman imperialism is important. So let's look at Carter's pages. I got page numbers almost per question here so that you can go through this. But look at Carter's other. This section, all who labor and are heavy laden. Who are the heavy laden laborers according to Carter? You'll find that at the bottom of pages 113 through 15. The burden of supporting the state and privileged class fell on the shoulders of who? The verb labor. What does it mean? Labor is intrinsically connected with the what? Imperial Rome dominates. Its domination system is antithetical to what? And then read that section, heavy laden or burdened. Who are the ones burdening the heavy laden? In extending its control, Rome turned who into allies? I will give you rest. What are the 3 overlapping ways rest is introduced? And then take my yoke. What are the 2 main ways yoke is used in the Septuagint or the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible / Old Testament? And how is it used here in Matthew? My yoke is kind or good, and his burden is small. Fill in this blank as you read through Carter. So Jesus's yoke blank is kind and good, displaying God's mercy, justice, and compassion in liberating those who wearily toil and are burdened by Rome's imperialism. And then finally, look through this last couple of pages in 127 through 29 because it's important. Jesus' social and theological challenge to Rome. This is where Carter really, the meat and importance of Carter's work comes to bear, the way he summarizes this section and shows how Matthew's interpretation of the Jesus movement is certainly a challenge to Roman imperialism. So, in all three, both in chapter 10 of Matthew, in Saldarini's readings, and in Carter's readings, there is this construction of the other. Matthew's disciples are clearly defined and marked in that chapter. And then Saldarini shows how Matthew interacted between Judaism and non Judaism. And Carter specifically deals with the Roman Empire. And for a class like ours, that's a humanities course, the way the biblical author and the way the secondary authors deal with the other begs this question: how do we construct the other? Race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, age, class, you just fill in the blank. What guides us as human beings when we construct the other? I know this is an election season, so we've heard a lot about immigration or illegal immigrants. What does it mean to construct the other like that? What's the difference between an illegal immigrant or some of the uh, terms that tend to be more kind to, uh, you know, not undocumented workers? How do those two characterizations of the other give life to or take life away from other people? I think these are the ways that a class like this can be really helpful, not just in our own understanding or knowledge about the Gospel of Matthew, but in our understanding of who we are as human beings and how we as human beings relate to other human beings based on whatever. Um, Race, ethnicity. Right now, we're in the middle or the beginning of Black History Month. Look at the racial discourse in America in our history up until now and see how racial discourse has constructed identity and otherness in both life giving and life destroying ways. Look at gender inequalities and gender differences in modern America. How do we construct those differences? Who wins, who loses? Sexuality right now is a major issue in the United States of America with the Supreme Court ruling that gay marriage is constitutionally um, legal in the United States. The issue of sexuality has been brought into the public arena in ways that it never has in the history of our country. So, how do we construct the other in relation to sexuality? Age is another big part. Are people too young to participate in society? Are they too old? How do we treat the aged? Those questions of ageism really come to the fore when we're talking about constructing the self and other. And then finally, class. How do we, as a society, come together or separate each other based on income levels? Is America a classless society as it's purported to be throughout its history? Or do we have class lines in America? How are those lines created and how are they policed? These are just some ways that we construct the other and construct the self at the same time. And I think the way Matthew negotiates this issue in this early Jesus movement and the way Saldarini and Carter deal with it, it's very helpful for us in our own modern times to think about how we understand ourselves and others. And here's just a couple of pictures to leave you with to make you think a little bit more about that. Here you have what looks like a wealthy businessman stepping over someone who appears to be homeless. At the top right, you have this progression of aging, what goes into aging, and how does it bring someone into and out of modern social norms. And at the bottom, you have this person who's kind of playing a trick, a gender trick, half woman, half male. It begs the question of the transgendered in America. So these are some ways that the study of the New Testament, a class like this, can help us think about our own modern dilemmas. I hope this short video is helpful. I know there's going to be a lot of work this week answering all those questions from those pages. Pay close attention in the readings. And this is the midterm week, so get your midterms turned in by Thursday. Take care.